Uncle Doug.
Uncle Dan.
You know, what we have here is a great big world with a whole fuck ton of people just sort of running around on it.
Less and less every day.
Well, and yet more and more also.
Yeah.
But
it's
you're
the
right.
circle of life.
It is the circle of life.
Yes.
And one of the things that our life circles around to quite a bit is people with dumb belief systems. So I think, and this is a phenomenon that seems to happen regardless of where the people end up being.
Yeah, it's a deep and rich mine.
It is it is apparently an evolutionary imperative in our species to believe idiotic bullshit, and I think Uncle Mark, you have some evidence of that.
Well, you know, today we're going to take a little diversion.
Uh-oh.
You know, we love to talk about, like you're saying, religions and cults and gods living and dead on the show, and that's all well and good. But when we shoved off from shore in this little dinghy nearly 3 years ago, if you guys recall, we did so with your solemn promises that I would, from time to time, be able to discuss my true passion on the show, the songbook of the amazing classic Harlem jazz, Dixieland, and ragtime impresario, Fats Waller.
I love Fats Waller.
I remember that promise well.
So
now that's contractual. We have to let you talk about Fats.
There's no way out of this.
Now,
right?
if you had tried to pull up Jelly Roll Morton, we would have kicked you off the show. But Fats
you
Waller,
didn't promise Jelly Roll. It was a gentleman's handshake. It's not in writing, like Fats Waller is.
Right.
Now I know we all have our favorites. Uncle Doug, I know your favorite Fats Waller classic is his cheeky, languid 1929 recording of Ain't Misbehavin', especially the version featured in the 1943 film Stormy Weather, where he was accompanied by a gorgeous young Lena Horne, the incredible jazz drummer Zutty Singleton, and the dancing comedy of Bill Bojangles Robinson. It's just delicious. And
It's my second favorite song right after It's Rainin' Men.
Yeah, by the Weather Girls. And Dan, as we've discussed many times, your fave Fats Waller track would be his super rare 1929 recording of Soothin' Syrup Stomp, because you love both the dramatic resonance and majesty of a church organ and Waller's incredibly playful, nay, phenomenally iconoclastic approach to the instrument. And while I love you both...
This is a very personal thing that you're doing right now.
I realize it's... And part of the promise is I would never expose your love of Soothin' Syrup Stomp. But I would have to say his masterwork was his 1939 recording of Your Feet's Too Big, music by Fred Fisher and lyrics by Ada Benson.
Yeah.
If you haven't heard it, treat yourself. He's splendid. Until you dial it up on YouTube, let me give you a taste of the lyrical fun. Say up in Harlem at a table for two, there were four of us, me, your big feet, and you. From your ankles up, I'd say you sure look sweet. From there down, there's just too much feet. Yes, your feet's too big. Don't want you because your feet's too big. Can't use you because your feet's too big. I really hate you because your feet's too big.
You know, I believe, and I genuinely think this is true. I think that the like 10 or 12, or maybe it's fewer than that, but the large a cappella group from Britain, the King's Singers, did a very snooty, hoity-toity version of Your Feet's Too Big.
Did they really?
I
I'll
believe
have to
so.
look that up. It's a very fun song.
Yeah.
So that's a fun taste. Fats Waller was a musical and comedic genius, and well worth checking out. But surely, dear listener, you're asking, Uncle Mark, what does he have to do with a recently defunct modern-day cult, and with the decision by General Curtis LeMay and Robert McNamara to firebomb Japan to the ground in World War II? Well,
that was my next question.
I know.
It's a pretty obvious line to draw, really.
It's funny how fast the emails come in, especially before I've even asked for them. But
right?
Well, he doesn't, not really at least, until you come with me on the strange journey from Fats Waller's foot phobia through post-war Japan to a classic, and I mean classic cult scam, where judgment about the size and shape of feet turned into hundreds of millions of coerced dollars. Curious?
What?
Okay, good. So, in the 1940s, a couple crazy kids separated by the Pacific Ocean got into a little dust-up. Imperial Japan was like, all this shit over here is ours, okay? And the new kid, America, was like, hey man, you just shot my fucking eye out, so fucking no. And then it got super awkward for a couple years, resulting in about 1.9 million dead soldiers, sailors, and Marines on all sides, so fucking yikes. So, most Americans think the extent of the apocalyptic destruction the U.S. wreaked on the Japanese mainland were the hideous twin nuclear attacks on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the summer of 1945. While those were horrendous acts of fiery inhumanity, they were just the last two. You see, two good, God-fearing Christian men, General Curtis LeMay and his statistics-obsessed subdemon, Robert McNamara, who would later go on to be one of the chief architects of the Vietnam War, had concocted a plan to bring Japan to its knees before the big booms of August 1945. Knowing most Japanese architecture was comprised of wood and paper, they developed a plan to drop incendiary and phosphorus bombs at night, and in so doing wiped out 67 of Japan's biggest cities completely off the map. It was only after that the U.S. decided to show Joseph Stalin what we had up our sleeve and use Japan as a proving ground, and the age of nuclear insanity began. So, also,
You're welcome, world.
You're welcome, Japan. So don't think I'm excusing Japan's abundant and hideous crimes under the imperial militarists. I'm just not interested in excusing ours either. But today our story does take place in the lovely and thankfully rebuilt Japan. So despite being utterly ruined, as I said, Japan rebuilt and rebuilt quickly, and by the early 1980s was an absolute titan in the global economy. They became a colossus of an export economy, selling cars and electronics to a world hungry for both. And with that came a cradle-to-grave social and employment system that, while intense and dehumanizing, was a sort of stability that Japanese society became very accustomed to. Right. Then came the huge financial shocks of the 1990s and the shattering of the notion of lifelong employment and the fraying of the tightly wound Japanese social framework. So I read several sociologists and journalists that weighed in on the reason Japan is both uniquely susceptible to a certain kind of cult, like Shinrikyo that we covered in episode 20, and the happy science cult, which we have yet to cover, but that's an entirely different loony bin. But it seems the historical shock of utter defeat and devastation in World War II, and then the social and financial dislocation of the 90s have left both the people and the government ill-equipped to deal with the radicalism of doomsday nihilists like Shinrikyo or the MLM-style scamminess of today's subject. Japanese cults tend to follow a highly rigid and hierarchical structure like their workaholic business culture, standing in as a replacement of that familiar but broken system for certain vulnerable Japanese, for whom that system is no longer fully intact. So that's also not to say the Japanese people are the most susceptible to cults. Who, boy, not even close. First among nations of people willing to give over their whole lives and all their monies to a charismatic ding-dong is the United States of dumbasses.
We're number one.
That's
We're
right,
number
boys.
one.
USA. Coming in very distant seconds are several post-colonial African societies. Japan is probably like in 7th or 8th place. And what new and exciting cult were our Japanese friends graced with in that dreamlike year of 1987?
Hello Kitty.
Oh, fuck. That's the whole thing. No.
Oh, shit.
It was, of course, Ho No Hana Sanpogyo.
Bless you.
That's not Japanese for Hello Kitty?
Very, very beautiful name, which translates to the way of the flower / the three teachings cult, but became better known by a name that the jazz maestro Fats Waller would have had a good chuckle at, the foot reading cult.
Ah.
Yeah. So the foot reading cult was founded, as I said, in the year of our Lord 1987 by one Hogun Fukunaga, who would prefer you call him by what his friends do, His Holiness, or the voice of heaven if you're nasty. His Holiness Hogun Fukunaga founded his little foot fetish MLM after a vaguely described spiritual experience. Now, see if you can spot any red flags here, fellas. In which it was revealed to him that he was the final reincarnation of both Jesus H. Christ and the Buddha.
Nice.
Go big or go home.
Yeah, so if you have your cult bingo cards out, you will shortly have a bingo. And pro tip to anybody out there, whenever you're looking to join a fun new social group or that sort of thing, before you sign the billion-year contract and don the goatskin leggings, ask the leader if they think they might be Jesus. Just buyer beware. You know what I mean?
Right. And to be clear, if they say yes, that's a bad thing.
Yes.
That's typically a bad thing.
Exactly.
So whoops, there we go. His Holiness Fukunaga began telling people he could tell everything about them by reading their feet. like palm reading, but for people who find hands more gross than feet, a.k.a. crazy people. And what could His Holiness, Jesus Buddha, tell by looking at your flippers? Why, everything. One poor fellow was just looking for treatment for his high blood pressure and was told his little toe being too little meant that only 30% of the energies of heaven were flowing through his body, and that only doing exactly what Mr. Voice of Heaven Fukunaga said would prevent the calamities soon to befall him. The man was driven to an ATM where he took out the equivalent of $1,800 for the foot exam.
Wow.
And was driven back to His Holiness's compound where he would, over a fairly short period of time, be bled of over $150,000 and have ensnared most of his family in the scheme.
Yeah.
Police later found a secret manual and interrogated the guru's staff and discovered that Fukunaga had told them to lie to terrify people into joining, saying things like, your life will be taken if you don't act now, and you will go bankrupt in 2 months' time unless you join. Although that last one would ironically turn out to be true, just not how they thought. The victim in question in this story was a well-to-do, not idiot of a guy called Tsuneo Kikuchi, who was a successful restaurant owner. What really convinced him to throw in with this obvious fraud was a bit of clever set decoration on the part of His Holiness Fukunaga. By this time, already swimming in fraudulent cash, Fukunaga bought his way into the presence of several, quote, highly esteemed people, like Mother Teresa, a fucking demon we discussed in episode 64, the Dalai Lama, kind of a fraud himself, who we discussed in episode 30, Bill Clinton, Pope John Paul II, and Mikhail Gorbachev. These people likely knew little about Fukunaga other than he had given some dough to some cause they supported. But he knew that prominently displaying photographs of shaking hands of such prominent people would impress the gullible and even the not-so-gullible, like poor Mr. Kikuchi, who was impressed indeed. So, money well spent on the office decor, His Holiness Fukunaga, King of the Jews. So, in addition to $900 to $2,000 for the initial foot reading, how did Jesus H. Fukunaga ultimately amass what police and prosecutors discovered to be well over $570 million?
Oh, my
God. Not bad.
Crazy money, right?
That's Mormon church money.
Yeah, that's like 0.1% of Mormon church money. Well,
Right.
like in the case of Tsuneo Kikuchi, people were whisked from their first phony exam to compounds where they dropped everything to chant and write Buddhist mantras for days at a time, while being kept awake for 36 to 48 hours at a stretch, while repeating the same mantra thousands of times, that being, I'm happy, I'm healthy, I'm happy, I'm healthy, I'm happy, I'm healthy.
I mean, it's useful.
Yeah, believe it and it will become.
You do that enough, and guaranteed you'll be neither.
Right.
So this is very similar to the repetitive hypnotic verbal decontextualization technique that is practiced by Scientology auditors,
right,
to break people down. Now, we know from the testimonies of survivors of our own deeply shameful torture tactics in the so-called War on Terror, nothing breaks a person's will down like sleep deprivation. So after 48 hours of forced wakeful chanting repetition, people hallucinate. They lose track of their bodies and physical reality, and they will do anything to close their eyes for just a few seconds. On top of this torture technique, they were constantly being told disease, catastrophe, and death were just barely being kept at bay by giving 1,000% effort to this new, quote, health regimen. And how could one eventually earn sleep? Most times it was by agreeing to immediately pay $22,000 for another multi-day seminar of chanting and writing mantras thousands of times, but with a little more sleep thrown in. If initiates refused to pay for it, they had to start their 48-hour grind all over again.
My God!
Until eventually they did agree.
I like it. It's a good scam.
I love how upfront it is about it. Just like sign over your money, and you can get some shut eye.
Right.
Yeah, that's like in the first day, right? Wow. The first day you join, you're just like all the way in.
Yeah, it's smart because if they get you like that, if you stick around after that day, they know they've got you.
Yeah.
You are got.
If you haven't jumped out a window by then. Yeah. And what else could earn you sleep? Signing a paper that you swore to recruit as many other people as possible within the next 72 hours.
Oh, my God.
TikTok, motherfuckers. So At this point, most people were exhausted and delirious. They were so exhausted and delirious, the only people they could even name were their own partners and even children who were signed up at the same cost and had to endure the same dehumanization. Children as young as 6 were dragged into this nightmare pyramid scheme. And that's all it really was, a sleep-deprived foot fortune teller MLM. The fact that it hasn't taken off like a rocket in Utah is nothing short of a miracle.
As of this
Give
recording.
it time.
Yeah, 20 minutes from now. Like so many others, Kikuchi was then ordered to enroll in further counseling in the form of some kind of private school for $7,000 a class. And even after he had dragged his entire family into it, the demand for new recruits never ceased. Cultists would scream and harangue the tattered initiates until they coughed up some new name, and any perceived lack of enthusiasm was met with menial punishment, like scrubbing toilets and then starting the sleep deprivation torture again.
Oh, man.
And while we're talking cults, we obviously need to know how many points His Holiness Fukunaga and the Ho No Hana Sanpogyo cult put on the cult body count board. And I got to say, they're a little bit of a letdown, guys.
Oh,
Yeah, Fukugama was investigated for manslaughter in the deaths of 4 initiates who seemed to have succumbed to exhaustion and dehydration in some kind of grueling purification exercise on Mount Fuji.
yeah.
But it seems like nothing came of that. So if you had them in your March Madness bracket, that's a tough break. So, so the last news source I was able to check said His Holiness, the Voice of Heaven, Buddha Jesus, Foot Creep, is in jail for fraud and practicing medicine without a license and enduring the slow grind of more than 1,100 civil suits brought by former followers. His hilarious dodge when questioned by the police was that God was no longer speaking through him and he can't recall what happened because it was God acting, not him.
yeah.
This guy's the whole package.
What are you going to do?
So I just hope the stress of it all isn't keeping him up for more than 48 hours at a time. So let us end this tale of shambolic scam and sham in the same way it began, with a reading from the lyrics of Fat Swaller's 1939 classic, Your Feet's Too Big. Oh, your feet's too big. Don't want you 'cause your feet's too big. Mad at you 'cause your feet's too big. I hate you 'cause your feet's too big. Oh, your pedalic extremities are colossal. They make you look just like a fossil. You got me walking, talking, and squawking 'cause your feet's too big. Yeah. So,
Amen.
whatever the fuck is up with Japan and cults, we're against it. Your feet don't tell you anything about your future any more than your palms do, and I will tell you that for free.
Boy, I would like to show this guy my feet after 5 months of quarantine and see what he says about me.
You need to go to an actual doctor. I can't help you. There's no amount of money that can fix that shit. So there you go. Enjoy Ho No Hana Sanpogyo.
Hey, I you know what? A candle that burns twice as bright burns half as long. I love the fact that this was like, give me your money as fast as you can.
Yeah,
I love that.
It's pretty funny. The Kikuchi said that, you know, they said there was going to be all this counseling and health therapy, and he's like, other than the chanting and the staying up, there was never anything. It was just names, 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 names. Give us names, give us names. Write a check. Give us your credit card. It was just like nakedly scammy.
He flew too close to the rising sun.
And they also pulled this caper where when he visited John Paul II, he took 2 rings with him, and he asked the Pope to put one of the rings on, and the Pope was like, okay. And then they got a picture with the rings on, and then he told the story that the Pope had been saving this ring to give to him.
Right. Oh,
Right.
good one.
Yeah. So
I like that.
Yes, the Pope, saying the Pope agreed that he was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. So, yeah,
Nice.
the guy's magnificent. He's a magnificent scumbag.
Well, there
that's
you
awesome.
go. I am going to pay people to let me get their picture with them.
Yeah, smart move.
Patreon goal, I will send you pictures of my feet if you send us money.
How about we don't send pictures of your feet
right.
if they send us money?
Exactly. I'm going to send
Yeah.
everyone pictures of my feet unless I get money right away.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
All
let's-
right.
Well,
Let's
let's
do it.
walk away.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed.